once again to, guess what, another reading from the Science of Mind magazine daily guides. This one's called the Turnaround, excuse me. This one's called the Turnaround Trifecta. First quote is from Emmett Fox, who was a pretty well-known New Thought teacher, writer in the 20th century. Excuse me, my nose is started to run a little bit, but I caught it. And from a publication called The Sermon on the Mount, The Key to Success in Life, we have this. With a new difficulty of any kind, it is the reception that you give it mentally and the attitude that you adopt toward it in your own thoughts that completely determines its effect upon you. That's what matters. So in other words, when stuff comes to us, especially stuff we don't like, then what Emmett Fox is saying here, as I interpret it, is how we accept it into our minds and what we do with it once it gets in there is really important. And the things that are really important are the feelings that we attach to it. I think this kind of goes back to, excuse me, I'm having some minor issues here. I think this goes back to a reading or a statement, actually, or I think it was actually a quote from one of the daily readings a couple of months ago. And this was from a Zen master in the Far East who had said to her students when they came to her, people came asking for advice, she would say, "Thank you very much, I have no complaint whatsoever." And I think if we adopt this attitude when things come into our mind, it helps us to put us in a state of mind for doing something about it. So I know that's my thoughts on that. And as I said, that was Emmett Fox, The Sermon on the Mount, The Key to Success in Life, on page 81. Ernest Holmes, for once, is actually a lot simpler. He says, yes, whenever we become engulfed by negative and undesirable circumstances, one of two things usually happens. We either use or lose our faith. Well, I think maybe he's right, but I think when things happen to us, then our spiritual grounding allows us to actually do the first, which is to use our faith. In other words, to look at things in a positive light and just know that things are going to work out. There's actually a lot more about this in the reading. And this is from our writer this month. She says, during a class discussion, one of my students formulated a brilliant practical method for navigating difficult times. I dubbed it the Turnaround Trifecta. And when I first read this, I thought, I wonder what's coming next. When challenges arise, first remind yourself of the spiritual truth that if something is on your path, it's for your good, even though it might not appear to be that way. Secondly, open yourself up to find the gift in that experience. Either you'll determine it straight away, or because you intentionally stated your receptivity, the gift eventually will reveal itself. In other words, intention is going to have an effect on what happens. And third, remind yourself the spiritual truth that all you have and all you need comes through the power of spirit, this power of spirit within you that will help you to meet this and any challenge. So in other words, she's saying, one, something happens, it's ultimately for your good. Second, and it will either be obvious right away, or you'll find out eventually what it is. And thirdly, remind yourself that you have the power within you to pretty well overcome anything. And if you read tales of people who've overcome tremendous odds, then you'll know that this has got to be true. And there's some truth in the matter that says, if somebody else can do it, then I can do it as well. And she gives an example of, you could call it coincidence, God incidence, but anyway, here it is. And it's from the past. It's from like 100, let me see, almost 200 years ago, 150 years ago, roughly, 130 years ago. She says, here's an example. William Seward, anyway, Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of State, broke his jaw in a serious carriage accident, almost a car accident. His family and colleagues believed this to be an unfortunate accident. However, 9 days later, when Seward still lay in bed recuperating, Lewis Powell barged into Seward's house and attempted to assassinate him at the same time as John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln. Powell's gun failed, so he took out a dagger and went for Seward's neck. However, the splint the doctors used on Seward's broken jaw protected him, preventing Powell from fatally slashing his arteries. There's the gift. She then tells us, next time something happens that you don't like, try the turnaround trifecta. I'm not sure I like using words like trifecta, but anyway, that's just the word it is. You know, I actually looked up in the dictionary.com, the definition of trifecta. I mean, yes, we know we're talking about three things, but I'll go to the dictionary and look it up and see what it says. Well, it's kind of amusing, really, because the first one, listen to what the first one is. It says, a type of bet, especially on horse racing, in which the bettor must select the first three finishers in exact order. And then the next one is a group, set, or a series of three, a triad. I mean, plain yogurt is the perfect food with its trifecta of carbs, protein, and fat. I would personally use triad, but there you are, or a threefold thing. But I think the point is, because I had to go and look it up, I'm going to remember it a lot more. And I think that's often true for us, that when we're experiencing difficulty, it's the time to remember whose we are and who we are, that we're expressions of spirit. But it's also a time, and she doesn't mention it here, Reverend Joanne, that is, she doesn't mention here that it's also a time sometimes to reach out to other people. We talked about this yesterday, and we talked about it a lot, that sometimes in order to establish that basis in truth and build up your faith, sometimes you need help. You need somebody to pray for you. And we do it all the time, right? I know we do, that something happens to people. My wife sees it on Facebook, somebody calls her, we get a text and say, oh, we'll pray for you. And we mean it. We will pray for that person. And I know it really, really helps because I've seen the results. So two things here. One is we need to establish that firm basis in faith by doing our spiritual work, listening to things like this, doing a little bit of meditation, quiet time, readings, prayers, just building up that grounding. And then we are able to actually rely on spirit, to know that spirit's with us the whole time. You know, my wife is never stopped using that expression. Oh, it must have been 4 months ago or more. It was before we went to the Netherlands for most of November. So it's November, December, January, February. Maybe it's like it's 5 months ago when we read it about. Thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever. And I've mentioned before, when people complain and my wife's around, she will say, or to me as well, thank you very much. I have no complaint whatsoever. And I think this fits in perfectly here, because if you can kind of adopt that kind of attitude when stuff happens, and it happens to all of us, then it really helps us to start moving through that experience. It's like the idea of counting to, when something happens and you want to react right away, and then the advice is count to 10 before you do anything. And by the time you've counted slowly to 10, you've oftentimes moved from reacting to responding. And it's a big difference, right? And I know that. And in the past, I think I've mentioned, when I was upset at work, really upset, I'd write an email, but I wouldn't send it. I'd keep it till the next day, look at it and think, nah, I'm not going to send that. It won't do any good in the long run. Anyway, the whole point of the message here today is that, we have these things to rely on when something happens. First, to remember that somehow or other, it's going to be for our good. And secondly, that we'll either determine what that is right away, or it will eventually reveal itself. And thirdly, that we have this basis of the Spirit that dwells within us. And in Christian teachings, lots of teachings throughout the world, the Holy Spirit dwells within you. And it's no different in our teaching. So that's really all I've got for today. The affirmation's a bit long. I didn't trim it down. If you want to trim it down, fine. I claim my spiritual power, centering and remembering the truth about myself when difficult times arise. Or you could switch it the other way around. So when difficult times arise, I claim my spiritual power. I center and remember the truth about who I am. I change affirmations around all the time. So that's really all I got to say today as I move my stuff to one side. And I believe that this is the month when our dog friend, Murphy, the human whisperer, writes again. Well, actually, his boss writes again. So, yeah, we'll have a little bit of that. So, remember to tune in to Reverend Lisa tomorrow morning. She's actually thinking about taking a break. So, give her some encouragement. I'm not saying don't ask her not to. I'm not saying ask her don't take a break. What I'm saying is give her some support. And if you think a break's a good thing for her, yeah, I encourage her to do that. She was talking about maybe coming back twice a week and then maybe eventually coming back altogether. But she's getting burnt out. She does an awful lot for our center, really. She's the one who goes in and puts the recordings on YouTube. She modifies them so YouTube's not going to kick them out. And she splits up sometimes some things from Reverend Jesse's talks, and she'll put those on separately. She does a lot of work behind the scenes. So she deserves our support. And I listen to her now and again, what about at the gym? And I did today. And it was pretty good. She ended up talking about love and how many different kinds of love there are in the Greek language. And I think she came up with 2 or 3. So I couldn't resist. I went and Googled it afterwards. Copied it and sent it off to her. So yeah, she needs some support. Either text her, email her, or pray for her. And then remember, listen to her tomorrow morning. She will be on at 9 tomorrow morning. That's kind of cool. So I gotta go because I have to attend another Creative Life Spiritual Center meeting this evening, and then, well, who knows where we'll go from there. So thanks very much for watching. Please give us a like on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you find us. Until next time, namaste.